Hi everyone, my name is Julien Lépine. I'm a solutions architect based in Paris, but covering EMEA. So I'm working often with Israeli-based customers. We're going to be speaking today around migrating and moving Microsoft Windows workloads on AWS. So we are going to cover quite a few topics. It's a pretty dense presentation. We go deep on some details. I'm going to be in the Ask an Architect booth just after that session. So if you have any questions or anything you want to dive deeper on, don't hesitate. We're here to help you. So when we speak about moving Windows workloads to AWS, the first questions we usually have from customers is, how do I manage my identities? Because I have an Active Directory that's been deployed on premises that I spent quite a bit of money implementing and managing globally for my company, and we're going to try to answer some of these questions. So we have three topics once you start having use of both Active Directory environments and AWS environments. You're going to start, and we're AWS, by managing the credentials for your infrastructure, something that we call Amazon IAM, Identity and Access Management. On top of that, you're going to have the management of the identity, so authentication and authorization for anything that is within your server application. So that's basically going to be Active Directory. And finally, we're going to be speaking a bit about federation, what you can do and what we can provide you in that space. So IAM, Identity and Access Management, it's a role-based access control system that is fully available on AWS. It's active for just about all the services from AWS, and you can create users, you can create groups, you can manage policies for the password, and you can assign policies for these users, specifying what are exactly the API calls they can do in each and every service from the platform. So IAM gives you full control over the infrastructure aspects of your platform, but IAM will not give you any access within the application. One of the nice features that I encourage every one of you to use in IAM is to be using multi-factor authentication. You can be using virtual-based MFAs or physical-based MFAs, so tokens with 6 digits that you will use when you authenticate on the platform. As I said, that's limited to the platform, to AWS and the services that are provided by it. What you're going to want to have most of the time is also to be using Active Directory. And you're going to have, and most of my customers do have an on-premises Active Directory implementation, and they're asking themselves, how can I migrate that, or how can I extend my identities to AWS? I'm going to show you a few different ways to do that. The first one is to create isolated domains. On the right, you can see that my company has 2 data centers, one in Tel Aviv, one in Jerusalem, and I have Active Directory that is deployed there. I want to start using the cloud. So I'm going to choose a region, whether it's going to be Ireland, around Dublin, or Frankfurt in Germany, and I'm going to deploy in a multi-AZ fashion my Active Directory. Multi-AZ is something that is really key when you deploy an Active Directory, because as it's the identity of your users, you want that service to be highly available. So you're going to create a fully isolated domain on AWS. My company.local, so company.local is my local identity provider, and on AWS I'm going to create a new company.cloud identity space based on Active Directory, where I'm going to create all the users that do have access to my application. But one of the questions that I have then is, yes, but I'm going to have the same users. I'm not going to teleport users in the cloud. It's going to be mine on-site users that are going to access my applications on the cloud. And to do that, you can use partners such as Okta. So we have a wide set of partners that manage identities, and they can basically synchronize or federate identities between multiple environments. So you can have fully isolated environments, and using Okta, you can make them work together. One of the nice things is we have that as a service, AWS Directory Service. It's fully managed Active Directory that you can deploy. It's going to be highly available into AZs. It's going to be backed up automatically. All the high availability is made for you. And in that isolated mode, it just works fine. Once you start migrating to the cloud, and so you're out of that phase where you had a POC, you started deploying stuff on AWS fully isolated, most of my customers say, yeah, but AWS is finally a full extension of my data center. So AWS is going to have exactly the same vision of my infrastructure and my users than my on-premises environment is having. Because I'm using AWS for DRP or because I've deployed business-critical applications on top of AWS. What you can do is, again, deploy in a highly available fashion domain controllers on AWS. So these are going to be virtual, so Windows machines, hosted on AWS with the Active Directory domain services role, promoted as domain controllers in the exact same domain. So what it gives you is that my user can use exactly the same credentials and can see exactly the same thing whether he's connected to a machine on premises or on cloud. So that model is the most integrated model. So if you're speaking about hybrid architecture, this is full hybrid Active Directory. And using costs between the sites and services from Active Directory, you can make sure that every single machine is going to authenticate to the closest Active Directory server available. So you have high availability, full extensibility, and a single view of your customers. But some of my customers say, yeah, I want to have a bit more control. I want to isolate a bit what's going on. And you can do the same thing with having a subdomain. So many companies actually do that, where they have an on-premises environment, and they have, if they have data centers in multiple regions, subdomains. So you could have cloud.company.local. It gives you the full visibility again, but yet you can isolate and say, only my group of administrators that is working on cloud is going to be able to automate that and administer that. So it's an interesting way of doing it. And finally, my most security-savvy customers, that's the process they usually do. It's having fully isolated forests and then creating a trust between the forests. What it gives you is it gives you SSO, so your users from on-premises can start accessing cloud-based applications using their existing credentials, so you have the visibility over the Active Directory, but you have full isolation in terms of what you want to synchronize. You're going to pass Kerberos tokens, but the cloud-based Active Directory is never going to have any credentials for your application. You can see the data, but you can select exactly what organizational units are going to be synchronized or viewed. So your security teams are going to have a good vision of what's going on, and yet you're going to still have that hybrid vision and that fully integrated single sign-on. And again, it's a process that's been requested a lot by many customers, and we work with customers in just about every industry. And actually, we provide that as a service. So using the same AWS directory service that I presented you in the first mode, where you had fully isolated environments, you can have that in a full hybrid, trusted environment where everything is going to be managed for you, backed up again, and the trust is going to be managed as well. So on-premises, on cloud, for you users, it's going to be exactly the same environment, yet for your IT and administration team, you can have differences if you want to have them. So now that we've spoken about IAM, how do I access my platform, and now that we've spoken about how do I extend my Active Directory, the last thing that is missing is how can I access my AWS platform and start new machines based on my Active Directory users' information? Well, actually, that's what STS and SAML integration does. So AWS IAM, Identity and Access Management, provides some bridges for Active Directory Federation services to be able to publish credentials and be reused directly from the platform. So for your users, they're going to have only one set of credentials. You can enforce MFA on the Active Directory side of things. And the information is going to pass to AWS, and they're going to have access to the platform, and only to the specific set of features you want them to have. You have, again, control over what's going on, and still a good isolation on the information that is being shared. So if you want to go a bit deeper, your users are not always going to be using the console. They may want to be using the CLI or having ADFS already deployed. We have, and you're going to have access to the slide and these links directly, we have white papers and explanation on how to deploy exactly these federation environments. So even if someone is developing and using CLI, PowerShell, or the .NET framework, you can have federated environments and federated credentials managed for you. So once we have that identity in place, we can now manage infrastructure identity, application-based identities, and we can also federate the identities. We will want to deploy architectures and applications on top of AWS. The first applications that my customers want me to deploy is SQL Server. That's like the #1 request we have from customers because that's where most of the data lives. So SQL Server, what people want is they want to have a highly available environment on SQL Server. The technology that is used in Windows and in SQL Server now is called SQL Server Always On Availability Groups. And what it does, it gives you a primary replica and a secondary replica with synchronous replication and the failover. What it gives for your application is basically a transparent way to access SQL Server in a multi-AZ, so multiple isolated sets of data centers with fully independent network, geological topologies, and power supplies. So really fully redundant sets of data centers, and still a single endpoint for your application, so really important for the applications. But deploying that on a cloud environment is not just copy-pasting what we have here. We have multiple ways to do so. The first one is to use shared storage. That is, if you want to be using SQL Server with standard licensing, so SQL Server Standard Edition, you're going to have a shared storage environment. And AWS does not yet provide a shared storage environment as a service, but we have partners such as Softnas and Sios who do provide fully redundant, natively highly available environments on shared storage for AWS. Whether you want to have high-SCSI, CIFS, or SMB storage, you can use these partners. And actually what you're going to have is finally a platform where you have three sets of environments: the primary replica, the secondary replica, and the Windows Server failover clustering that is going to do the heartbeat between them, and finally the shared storage, which is also going to be used as a quorum. Using that platform, you can have a pretty good, highly available environment in a multi-AZ fashion, again on AWS. My customers tend to want to have the non-shared storage model deployed. They want to have fully isolated environment, because once you start using shared storage, that shared storage is going to be the point of contention maybe for storage. Here what we have is we have a setup where we have two isolated SQL Server instances in two different availability zones. So we are in a natively highly available environment again. We're going to have replication between the machines. So each machine is going to have its own set of storage. And the replication is going to ensure that once a transaction is set and is committed to the primary replica, it's fully committed to the secondary replica before answering OK. So you have a synchronous availability. And what you need, and that's one of the points with distributed computing, you need to have a quorum. So you need to have at least 3 machines to make a decision. And what we have is we have a witness server. That's just a really small instance with a file share service. It only needs to be providing CIFS or SMB storage to make sure that your environment is going to be highly available. And with that setup, you have 3 completely isolated sets of data centers, 3 AZs, and 2 AZs for storing SQL Server. And you can go even further by having 3 servers of SQL Server, or even 4, so you can even extend that. But that is the canonical setup for SQL Server always-on availability groups with SQL Server Enterprise Edition. So that is one of the key. It's only working for Enterprise Edition with that model. What you can do also, if you have that setup with 3, so every time I speak about primary and secondary, you can imagine that we have a third witness server that is somewhere else to make sure that we have the quorum for decision. Once you have that, you can extend it. Because what we've been speaking about up until now is having an active and a passive server. SQL Server provides new features and interesting features for BI, for backup, for many other features where you can have an active read-only replica that is going to be available. And what you do is you just extend your availability group by adding a third replica, which is going to be an active one with asynchronous replication. So what it gives you, you can have a reporting application that is going to be running on your application directly without having to touch the prod. And you can even extend that, saying, I want to make sure that my DRP is going to be okay. You could have directly that third availability, so that third replica, in a data center that would be your own on-premises environment. So using these setups, you can see that using AWS, you can have a fully redundant environment for storing SQL Server, and you can basically answer every need you have, whether it's making sure that you can have a backup plan, a DRP on cloud, on premises, isolated environments, reporting. Everything can be set up on AWS. And what we see a lot is customers saying, yes, I do want that, but I want that in a simple way, because creating availability groups, creating Windows Server failover clustering, only saying that is a first step. But creating them, managing them, making sure that everything is fully configured and up and running all the time can be a bit long. So what we've come up with is Amazon RDS for SQL Server. Amazon RDS, Relational Database Service, provides you SQL Server in a highly available environment, so think synchronous replication between two machines plus witness as a service. Everything is managed for you, so to create an environment, it's a few clicks in the console, or within Visual Studio if you want to do that directly. Failover is automated, so if a machine fails, we're gonna fail over to the active machine, so to the previously passive machine, make it the active one, and create a new machine, get it back on track, and make sure that the system is still highly available. Everything is done for you. You can have patching, you can have backups, and you can have point-in-time recovery to the near second where you want to do the recovery. Really important if you want to prevent against malicious attacks or any mistake like, and it will happen, someone running an update or delete without the workloads, where basically the command is fully valid, the service has been doing exactly what it was supposed to do, it just updated everything with a price of 0, which is nice for your customers, not that nice for your CFO. And point-in-time recovery is going to give you the capacity to get back to that exact second and get the database back to exactly where it was before that mistake. And lastly, we just updated that with AD integration. So if you use AWS Directory Services for Microsoft Active Directory, so the last setup that I showed you with the trust, you can benefit from having RDS SQL Server that is Windows integrated. So you don't have to manage credentials and login passwords for RDS. You just use the Windows credentials and the Active Directory groups that you have to manage this authentication. So really easy and really nice to be able to run on this. Once we have SQL Server, people usually want to run bigger applications. And we're going to be speaking about the server products from Microsoft. So server products are going to be Exchange and Sharepoint in that case. We're going to also speak about Link, about Dynamics. Most of these setups are going to be pretty similar in the way we build them. So we're going to have core infrastructure. That core infrastructure is going to be, again, 2 availability zones. Completely isolated sets of data center. In each availability zone, we're going to have 1 Active Directory server. Whether it's a self-managed Active Directory environment or whether it's an AWS Directory Services environment, it's pretty much the same. So 1 in each AZ. Then what you will want to have is a NAT instance. Now, for those who've been with Steve in the just previous session, we have managed NAT gateways, or you can build your own and have filtering directly using remote access from Microsoft, for instance. And you also want to have a remote desktop gateway. That remote desktop gateway will give you access to the administration side of things when you want to build the platform. And as you'll see, that setup is basically the core infrastructure for any Microsoft product that you're going to be deploying on AWS. Sorry. So when we want to deploy Exchange, as you see, Exchange is pretty much the same. The only thing that we've done here is deploy Exchange in a single role, so in a multi-role. So each machine is going to have all the roles from Exchange, and with just adding 2 machines, we have a fully supported Exchange environment on AWS. That can handle quite a few thousand of users. And using Amazon EBS for storage, you can have terabytes and terabytes of data for each of your machines. So really having the deployment of specific server products from Microsoft on top of AWS gets pretty easy. If you want to get to Sharepoint, we have more tiers in Sharepoint because we're going to have a SQL Server that you can deploy, again, exactly like we've shown, using SQL Server always on availability group, Windows Server failover clustering, and everything is going to be highly available. On top of that, you're going to have the application servers and the web servers. That is what we call a traditional topology of Sharepoint, and that, again, can scale quite a bit of users. You can also twist that model by having more front-end servers for Office web apps, for some BI and reporting applications. So that kind of model, and as you can see, we have still the core infrastructure. We still have our NATs, we still have our DGWs, we still have our Active Directory. And one of the things is, you can basically scale to have an all-in-one situation. And I'm speaking about this all-in-one situation where you have Exchange, Link, Sharepoint, Active Directory, SQL Server, remote desktop gateways, and NAT everything can be built inside one single item in AWS, which we call an AWS CloudFormation template. I'll get to that just later, because all of that can be built within, I'd say, a few hours, with just entering 10 or 20 values at the beginning, and everything is going to be set up automatically for you. So really, you can build this kind of environment, which is basically productivity for any company in a box, within 2 hours on AWS. So what you may want to do as well, once you've started moving infrastructure to AWS, is say, yes, but I want a Sharepoint service. I don't want to have to manage that infrastructure, and I want to have more than just moving and lift and shifting my infrastructure to AWS. So what you can do is start using partners. We have partners such as Metalogix and AVPoint, who do something that is really nice with Sharepoint. Instead of having all the files stored in your database, which is the basic model for storing data in Sharepoint, you can use Metalogix or AVPoint to move that data directly to Amazon S3. Amazon S3 is an object store. So you're going to have a database, SQL Server, that is going to hold about 5% of the data that it was holding before, because it's only going to hold the data that matters, which is the relational data. Every blobs are going to be stored directly on Amazon S3, and S3, as you know, is a highly available blob store that basically can store any amount of data you want. So you don't have to care about making sure that S3 is highly available. It's natively built to be highly available. And then you can focus on a database that is going to be a fraction of the size of the initial database you had. So cheaper in terms of licensing and way faster because you can have smaller machines, more RAM usage. So it's definitely a good practice. Other things that people want to have, I have an Exchange environment, but I'd like to have more than everything stored on Amazon EBS, which is a block storage service from AWS. You can use services such as Veritas that are going to offload the data and archive the mails directly to Amazon S3. For your users, it's going to be fully transparent. It's like any archival process running on Exchange. But everything is, again, going to be stored on Amazon S3. So again, no redundancy, no RAID to manage. Everything is managed for you. And then we have new features that are pretty interesting. If you want that as a service, we have the AWS Marketplace. Early this year or late last year, we have a partner that just deployed Sharepoint per user on the marketplace, available in 20 minutes. So you go to the AWS Marketplace, you select Sharepoint, you select either bring your own license or pay per user, and it's going to deploy for you a Sharepoint environment, fully automated. So again, automation, it's pure Sharepoint. It's exactly the same Sharepoint that you can have on premises. So you can do all the automation you want, you can do all the customization you want, deploy specific web parts, deploy specific custom applications directly on Sharepoint, but everything is just automated and managed for you. And finally, for everything that I've been speaking about in terms of Exchange, Sharepoint, core infrastructures, we do have quick starts. What is a quick start, you're going to ask me? It's a white paper that explains you what we've done with it. And it's also a CloudFormation template that allows you within a few minutes to start a fully automated environment. So everything that I've showed you is replicable, available, and documented on AWS. Just look for the AWS Quick Start or go to the tinyurl.com link that I have here, and you can access all these quick starts. But when we speak about Microsoft, we're not only speaking about Exchange and SQL Server, we're also going to be speaking about development, because developers are a big part of what Microsoft Workloads represents. We do provide an AWS SDK, and to understand why we do that and why it matters, we have to get back to the mantra of AWS. Everything should be provided as a service available over the web, which is why we're called Amazon Web Services. So we have AWS endpoints. There are REST APIs available, secured with IAM, fully encrypted using HTTPS. So all the security and high level of availability you have from AWS is represented by these AWS endpoints. On top of that, we've built a layer that is compatible with .NET 3.5, 4.5, Phone, and Store. So any kind of usage and any kind of applications, we even have a .NET Core compatible. So for those who think about migrating to .NET Core, we have a .NET Core compatible API layer. So you can basically start calling the APIs from AWS directly from your code. You don't have to think about WebSockets or stuff like that. Everything is managed for you. So we have the service clients. The service clients are the classes available in the SDK. They're pretty low level. So if I want to start an instance, I'm going to have to call the EC2 service .run instance. It's going to start me a new EC2 instance. But if you want to have more flexibility and even less code, we do have utilities that are provided. So the common use cases we see from customers where it requires multiple levels of integration, we have automated them. So transferring from S3 or getting a virtual machine from your existing VMware or Hyper-V environment to AWS can be done in just one single line of code. So pretty interesting to get integrated. And finally, we provide that across a broad set of platforms. So we have the tools for PowerShell, for Visual Studio. We have even some enhancement for your application. So if you have AWS, if you have Microsoft ASP.NET sessions that you manage in memory, which is the default settings for ASP.NET session management, we have a drop-in replacement for the session provider that is going to use DynamoDB in the backend. So instead of having sessions in memory, you're going to have a highly available NoSQL database for managing your sessions. So scale is not going to be an issue. And again, we have trace listeners, more information that comes from the SDK to help you debug and see what's going on in your applications. We're also fully integrated with Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is a go-to tool for developing .NET application. It's been in the market for quite a while now. And we are fully integrated with the Visual Studio .NET 2013 and 2015 environment. On the left, you can see the AWS Explorer. So within Visual Studio, any developer can see all the resources that are running in his account. And he can even interact with them, create new databases, create new environments. When you have a web application, you can just right-click and say, deploy that web application to AWS. It's going to use AWS Elastic Beanstalk. It's going to deploy the environment, make it highly available, make it monitored, and make it logged. So every log is going to be stored in Amazon S3 directly. So you can focus, and your developers can focus on the pipeline of development and not on the heavy lifting of managing AWS. Everything is automated for them. And finally, we have core project templates. So if you start a new project, you can just basically select from a template, from an existing template, and make it work directly. So just to show you some examples of how you would code storing data in Amazon S3. That is the entire code for storing data in Amazon S3 and getting it back in your application. So it's really not long. So anyone that wants to integrate an application to Amazon S3, we have 3 lines of code. So it's 5 lines with the new lines. Put object is the call of the method. You just take either a local file or a stream in your .NET application. It's going to be stored in S3. You don't have to care about it anymore. And to get it back, just call getObject. So again, pretty easy, pretty nice way to store data. If you want, and if you have applications that have some coupling problems, I've been at the Ask an Architect booth, and it's a question that comes a lot. I have some processes in my applications that do take a lot of time. And I don't want to have all my users waiting for these large processes to be working. You can decouple your application. And loose coupling of your application is definitely a way to set you free in terms of making sure that these large batches can run and will run only when necessary. And basically what you're going to do, instead of making the work directly in your front-end application, you just send the message to a queue, and later in another application you can get the messages from that queue and do the processing. What it gives you a scaling layer and a highly available fashion where your backend processes will be fully isolated from the activities that goes from the front end. So interesting points, and really one of the keys to make sure that your application is going to be highly available and fully scalable. We also do provide extended support. So we don't only provide SDKs and ways to code. We have managed services such as AWS Elastic Beanstalk, where basically you just focus on your code. It's going to be deployed, managed, and fully automated in terms of scaling, backing up, and deployment processes. We have the code star services, so code commit, code pipeline, code deploy, that basically automate everything that is going on in terms from the moment you click commit on Git to the moment it's deployed in production. We have, of course, the SDKs and PowerShell commandlets. Everything that we have in the APIs and console is available via the SDK. And we have just shy of 2,000 commandlets available in CloudFormation. So you can integrate that in any application that supports .NET or PowerShell. And finally, we are the de facto standard for most of the existing environments of CI, CD, and even the IDE. So if you want to use Unity, Xamarin Studio, or any other environment such as Eclipse, we do have plugins and support directly for these IDEs. So DevOps. Seen from the Microsoft space, people tend to usually click. It's something that still exists. People like to connect to the machines. They're joined to a domain. They have a username and password. They can log to them, and they can do stuff directly on the interface. The first recommendation we have is please do so via a secure means. So use Remote Desktop Gateway. Don't connect directly to your machines. Remote Desktop Gateway is a service available on Microsoft Windows directly, where you're going to have an HTTPS tunnel to connect to your machines. We have, again, white papers that explain how to build that using the right certificates on AWS. And what it gives you is just an ease of mind to make sure that when you connect to a machine, you're going to be connected over a secure channel and not directly over RDP on the internet. But once you've created that, you can also extend that and say, instead of going to the machine and clicking directly on them, I would want to do the same things with PowerShell. And using the same kind of setup, you can have a PowerShell gateway. So you're going to connect to a machine, and instead of connecting through RDP, you're going to issue PowerShell connections and issue PowerShell commands directly to your machines. So what we can have now is an AWS administrator from the data center that is going to connect and act on the machines directly with PowerShell over a secure connection. It's really one of the ways we want you to start building architecture, and it's the way we recommend people to build that. But if we want to be clear, what we encourage you to do is to go DevOps. To go DevOps is to go, I should never have to connect to machines to do anything. These machines should be highly automated, and everything should be done by itself. As Werner Vogel says, there is no single reason why a human should be doing an action. Everything should be automated in terms of scaling and managing failures. So in our case, you should do everything through PowerShell. Every single CLI code that you have in the documentation and that have been presented in the session is available in PowerShell. We even have some PowerShell commandlets that don't exist anywhere else. And we also have new services such as AWS Simple Systems Manager, who help you automate everything that is inside your machines. So when you start a machine, you can auto-domain join it. So really easy, the machine is going to be on the domain, ready to be used. You don't need to have any machine access. The machine is going to get the data itself. So no one will connect to those machines. And in terms of automation and capabilities, it's really key. Log management, as I said, don't rely on the event log and connecting to the machines. We have an agent that sends data to Amazon CloudWatch Logs. And once you're in CloudWatch Logs, you have access to a whole set of features that are either going to be archiving the data, or with AWS Lambda, directly giving you access to coding against the logs that have been accessed. So if you have someone that tries to attack, or if you have machines that do have errors that are unintended, you can act directly. Elasticsearch is going to be for the Kibana and visualization and search services around the logs, and Amazon Kinesis, again, give you real-time streaming capabilities over your logs. And once you've automated the logs, what you want is to automate the platform that runs behind it. So we have a full set of services. So again, I put a star in this slide because the definition of yes, pass, and all that depends on the people, but it's one of the visions we have. So infrastructure as a service, basically you do it all by yourself on Amazon EC2. Really perfect. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the fully managed platform for executing code where you don't need to focus, you only need to focus around code and not around architectures. We have AWS Lambda. Really important, serverless architectures are one of the best way to go now. And in the middle, we have the DevOps methodologies. Whether you take DevOps from the ops side with AWS OpsWorks, where operations are going to create stacks, application, issue chef commands, or whether you take ops from the DevOps from the dev side, where developers create bundle and just deploy them, and the entire architecture and infrastructure is fully automated. One of the good things is that it's not an all or nothing choice. You can choose to use all of them in combination, and you can even automate all of that using AWS CloudFormation, which is a fully automated environment where you describe your stacks and you can run replicably stacks. Say you want to deploy in multiple regions or multiple environments of the same application. Using CloudFormation, you can do it really fast. If we speak about Windows, we have to speak about licensing. Licensing is one of the key of Microsoft environments. So one of the key programs that allows you to reuse your existing licenses from Microsoft on AWS is what we call the license mobility through software assurance. It's a program it's a Microsoft program that allows you to bring your own licenses on AWS if these are licenses that are covered by enterprise agreements and the software assurance. So most of the licenses from large companies are fully eligible to that, and you can bring most of the environments that you want directly to AWS. But we have more options. So if I take the 3 modes we have for licensing, the first one is you want to use Windows Server or you want to use SQL Server. You can do that directly by having licenses included by AWS. You don't have to care about speaking to Microsoft or managing your licenses. Everything is managed by AWS. We pay the licenses, and when you pay per hour for an instance, you're going to pay the licenses included in the price of your instance. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the dedicated host, which is a new offering where you can bring your existing licenses without, even for some licensing, having software assurance. So it is really close to what you have on premises in terms of licensing. You are in full control over the host. And in the middle, we have this license mobility program that allows you to run your application on shared tenancy hardware. So you can choose, and as we'll see, customers do choose between a fully license included model, a fully BYOL model where you can bring your existing own licenses, and a hybrid model where basically that's where I see most of my customers going, is you can select from your existing licenses where it makes sense to reuse them, and select where it also does make sense for scaling layers, for instance, to use license-included hardware and platforms from AWS. So again, licensing is not an all-or-nothing choice. You can choose between the different models. We have teams, like myself, that are dedicated to working on the Microsoft environment on AWS, and we can help you and try to guide you around what are the licensing questions you may want to have. MSDN, important for developers. As soon as you start using dedicated instances or dedicated hosts, which is a way of deploying hardware, you can use your MSDN licenses on AWS. You can bring OS licenses, you can bring licenses for every server product that is covered by MSDN. So really an important thing to know when you develop on AWS. You're going to have a question, and most of my customers do have questions around supportability. Yes, we are fully supported, and you are going to be fully supported when you run instances with Microsoft products on AWS. Whether it's Exchange, SharePoint, Link, Dynamics, you name it, we are supported, and we are an authorized cloud provider to run licenses and environments from Microsoft on AWS, of course. And we do cover just about every imaginable use case with references on AWS. So whether you're speaking about collaboration, Exchange, Link, some companies have even closed their data center like Hess and moved everything to AWS. Web, mobile, media, of course, mail, ERP. If I take the example of SharePoint, we have Dole Foods, who did migrate their SharePoint environment to AWS, and their savings multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars per year just running that on AWS, because they can scale that up, down, turn them down when they don't need the environment. So really an interesting point of view for them, and it's just a lot of savings. And of course, BI, if you need to have lots of data and analyze it. So we are here to help. I've shown you lots of slides, lots of content. The point is you're not alone when you do this kind of applications. You have access to AWS Resources. Solutions architects, such as myself, were visible today because we have the black t-shirts and black liners. You also have the account management teams and marketing teams that are available to help you. Same as us, but with the white t-shirts from AWS. We have professional services. So if you have a project that requires an in-depth engagement from AWS and with AWS on a long period of time, you can do that with professional services. Support is of utmost important in the process. You want to have support. Support is not only a guarantee that it's not going to fail. You're going to have access to people that will help you architect and make sure that your applications are going to be up and running when you need them. So if you launch a new environment, if you have a big product launch, using premium support, you can have teams that are going to work with you to make sure that that environment is going to run exactly as you intend to the day it starts. And finally, as you can see in the Partner Expo Hall, we do have partners, and we would be nothing without just awesome ecosystem of partners, both on the ISV side, so for the editors, and also in the managed service providers, system integrators. We have thousands of partners worldwide, so really take a look at our partner ecosystem, and I'm sure you're going to find people to help you. Finally, training and certification. Again, we have a really great team that can help you learn and certify yourself on the platform. If you want to find them, they're just out just before getting out for the Partner Expo. On the left, you have access to the hands-on lab. It's a set of labs that you can run. We have just more than 100 labs available. You can try everything that I've been speaking to you about. So deploying Exchange on AWS, you can run that. Running Sharepoint, SQL, Link on AWS, everything is available. It's a click-by-click solution where we explain you how to run that. They also can deliver training on-site or with multi-enterprises for you, so you can contact them directly. And finally, they run the certification program. So if you want, and I encourage you, you can get certified as an AWS professional on many processes. I'm done with my presentation. Please don't hesitate to post comments and note the session. We really value the feedback that you give us. It helps us tune the content and tune the events to make sure that we stay on top of what you want us to do. And on that, I thank you a lot, and I wish you a great day.